Hey folks, tonight we're diving headfirst into something brutal, grandiose, and totally unforgiving life in the Roman Empire. Not as a senator, not as an emperor, no golden laurel wreath, and definitely no marble bathtub. Tonight, you are not Julius Caesar. You're just some poor soul tossed into a world of sandals, sewage, and state-sponsored nailings with zero prep. So before you get comfy, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually like what I do here. Also, hit me up in the comments with where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fun to see who's tuning in from around the globe. Now, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for some white noise. Let's just embark on tonight's journey together. You open your eyes and hear shouting, roosters crowing, and kids crying somewhere down the hall. Congrats. You just woke up on a Roman island, the ancient version of an apartment building. Think of it as a multi-story death trap held together by dust, prayers, and some seriously sketchy architecture. Maybe you're living on the third or fourth floor. Bad news, the higher the floor, the poorer the tenant, and the more likely the ceiling will collapse if someone spills olive oil on you. Your room's small, not bigger than a closet, with stone walls that sweat in summer and freeze your bones in winter. No windows, just a tiny hole that lets in air, smoke, and a parade of pigeons. Your mattress is stuffed with straw and lice. Your blanket smells like damp wool and regret. No furniture, no decorations, and definitely no stove. Cooking indoors is banned. One tiny flame could torch the whole building. And fire safety rules, yeah, those don't exist yet. Your entire worldly possession is a clay cup, a ragged shirt, and maybe a wooden comb. If you're fancy, no bathroom. Not in your room, not in the building. Your chamber pot sits silently judging you in the corner. You'll have to haul it down narrow, creaky stairs to dump it in the street gutter, hope you don't slip and end up smeared with breakfast. Oh, and the walls, paper thin. You hear your neighbors praying, coughing, arguing with their wives, and sadly, no, not arguing with their wives. If you catch my drift, the air reeks of smoke, mold, and the distinct stench of filthy humans. Someone's baking bread downstairs, but you're not invited. Street vendors are yelling about figs and fish guts. A distant centurion yells orders at some poor guy probably bleeding somewhere. You haven't even left the building, and you're already sweaty, itchy, and maybe inhaling lead dust from the plumbing. Welcome to a Roman workday. You're not an emperor, you're not a gladiator, you're just a pitiful soul in a crowded apartment, trying not to fall down the stairs or piss off the city's god before noon. And you've still got 23 hours left. Now that you survived the dizzy stairs, it's time to tackle the morning's second urgent issue, the bladder. Of course, no bathroom in your apartment, no sink, no flush, not even a bucket. Instead, you drag yourself down the street, one hand clutching your chamber pot, the other holding on to modesty, heading for the nearest toilet, a Roman public restroom. Calling it public is generous. It's basically a social club for strangers who don't mind eye contact while doing their business. Once there, you'll see a long stone bench with holes cut into it. Below runs a shallow water trough, just enough to wash away the collective shame of the city's lower class. You can sit down if you dare, hoping the guy next to you isn't in the mood for small talk. Privacy, forget it. Doors, nope. Everyone treats it like a town square with extra sound effects. Merchants discuss grain prices while staking their claim. A retired soldier complains about his sciatica. Meanwhile, you're just trying, Not to stare too hard at the guy next to you who's chewing olives like they're the last fruit on earth. Then comes the real treatment, the tersorium. Instead, you drag yourself down the street, one hand clutching a chamber pot, the other pretending to be modest, headed for the nearest bathroom, the Roman version of a public restroom. Calling it public is being generous. This was basically a social club for strangers who didn't mind making eye contact while doing their business. Once there, you'd find a long stone bench with a bunch of holes carved into it. Underneath the bench, a shallow stream of water ran by, just enough to wash away the collective shame of the city's lower class. You could sit down if you dared and pray your neighbor wasn't in the mood for small talk. Privacy, forget about it. Doors, nope. People treated it like a town square with added sound effects. Businessmen discussed grain prices while squatting. A retired soldier complained about his sciatica. Meanwhile, you just try not to stare at the guy across from you, chewing olives like it's the most fascinating thing on earth. Then came the real treatment, the tersorium. That's a communal sponge on a stick, soaking in vinegar or salt water. Theoretically, you rinse it before use. In reality, let's just say that sponge has seen things you don't want to think about. Salt water, theoretically, you should rinse first. In reality, well, let's just say that sponge has seen stuff you don't want to know about. You wipe hesitantly and hope the vinegar does its magic. Feeling lucky, maybe you bring your own rag. Feeling fancy, maybe some moss will do, but odds are you're just using whatever the next poor soul left behind and silently enduring the collective shame of communal hygiene. And if you think you can skip this ritual by ducking into an alley, think again. There are laws against public peeing. The fines are real, and Roman law enforcement. Not exactly known for, when you're done, wash your hands, wait. Nopes, you don't have to. No soaps, no running water. Just the communal basin everyone's fingered more than in a handshake contest. You leave the latrine feeling a bit lighter, and somehow a little more peaceful inside. But hey, this is Rome. Now it's breakfast time, if you can even call it that. So, you've survived your morning routine without falling into a gutter or getting arrested. Impressive. Now it's time to eat. The most important meal of the day, unless you're Roman, in which case, it's more like a polite ritual before heading out to suffer. Welcome to Iantaculum, the Roman breakfast party featuring exactly 2 items, stale bread and watered-down wine. Sometimes cheese, sometimes olives, but mostly just disappointment. Forget coffee. Romans didn't have that luxury. No eggs, no bacon, no pancakes, and definitely no oat milk. Breakfast wasn't about satisfaction. It wasn't about survival either. Your bread might be panis rusticus, a tough, dense lump made from grain and stone-ground flour, baked yesterday or the day before. It's so solid it could be a weapon. With a texture like limestone, the wine is diluted because even they knew drinking booze before sunrise was a bad idea unless you're a senator. No stove in your apartment, so you eat standing on the street or squatting by a fountain with other folks who couldn't care less. Treating bread like bland tree bark. If you're lucky enough to have some olive oil or a splash of garum, the famously salty Roman fish sauce, congratulations. You've just added a little horror flavor to your otherwise bleak meal. If you're wealthy, you might get fruit or honey, but probably not. You're an average Roman citizen, rich enough not to be a slave, but poor enough to envy your neighbor's broken goat milk jug. Occasionally, street vendors stroll by, selling hot chickpea fritters or honey cakes. And for a second, you feel hope. Then you remember your purse is emptier than a gladiator's sympathy. So, you bite into your bread and pretend it's cake. And that's how a day starts, with carbs, mild dehydration, and the growing realization that you're about to walk 7 miles in Roman sandals with only crumbs of old food in your stomach and a tipsy buzz left over from last night's wine. Could anything be more delightful than heading to work now? After a hearty breakfast of bread and disappointment, it's time to face the workday in Rome. And let's be clear, unless you're a senator, a patronized poet, or one of the lucky few who inherited land from a childless uncle, you're still working and working hard. You might be a laborer, porter, potter, builder, street sweeper, or if you're really unlucky, a sewer worker. Rome needs a lot of stuff roads, aqueducts, temples, baths, and someone has to build them. That someone is you, barehanded under the sun, wearing sandals shaped like a soggy leaf. The Roman workday starts early. The sun's just up, but the foreman's already yelling in Latin and swinging a stick. Show up late, and you get paid less or worse beaten, humiliated, or fired. In Roman terms, that means starving to death for honor. Your tools, basic. You dig with a shovel made from wood chips and prayers, haul bricks on your back, and drag water from a hut smelling like old socks and broken dreams. And they wore sandals shaped like soggy leaves. The Roman workday started ridiculously early. The sun barely peeked up, and the foreman was already yelling in Latin and swinging his stick. Show up late, and you'd get paid less, or worse, be beaten, humiliated, or fired, which in Roman terms meant you starved with honor. Your tools, basic at best. You dug with a shovel made from wood shavings and prayers, carried bricks on your back, and hauled water from a shack that smelled like old socks and broken dreams. No gloves, no helmets, so just sweat, dust, and the constant thought that one slip could snap your spine and your career at the same time. And if you're a craftsman, good luck. Breaking spines and careers simultaneously. And if you're a craftsman, good luck. You're up against hundreds selling the same cheap clay pots, sandals, or knockoff tunics. Undercutting is the name of the game. Quality. Who cares if some rich citizen decides he doesn't like your face? Even better jobs like messenger, accountant, or teacher aren't much of a prize. It's either you sprint through Rome's chaotic streets, clutching scrolls for someone who'll forget your name, or you try your luck with, well, something else. Teach Latin to a bunch of senator kids who think they're gods. Women worked to spinning thread, weaving, selling veggies, running market stalls, plus juggling kids, managing the household, and somehow surviving childbirth multitasking before it was trendy. After all that, you get maybe a quick lunch break. If your supervisor isn't in a bad mood or trying to impress some visiting bigwig, yeah, you either work or you die trying. Rome might last forever, but your back won't. So congrats, you survived. The morning without fainting or getting flogged. Now, time to explore ancient Rome's streets, a chaotic, packed mess, clearly designed by someone who hated personal space and public health. Imagine this: the sun's high, the city's buzzing, and the streets literally alive. Not poetically, but literally rats, flies, stray dogs, farm animals, beggars, merchants yelling in 6 different languages, kids running wild, pickpockets pretending to help old ladies while stealing your wallet, like Times Square but without plumbing, and everyone's dragging a goat around. Speaking of infrastructure, Roman roads were engineering marvels straight as arrows, nicely paved, often swimming in a lovely cocktail of urine, spilled wine, vomit, animal waste, and last night's fish sauce leftovers. The middle of the street doubled as an open sewer. Step off the curb without looking, and congratulations. You just gave your sandals an involuntary bath in humanity's holy suffering stream. Horse-drawn carts thunder by with 0 speed limits, no crosswalks, and 0 chill. They don't stop for pedestrians. In fact, Roman law actually banned heavy wagons from the city during the day, meaning drivers had to race through at night in the dark. No brakes, basically the chariot driver version of a deadline. If you don't get crushed by wheels, you'll get elbowed, hit with baskets, or yelled at by a furious fishmonger, screaming about spoiled eels. Then there's the thick air, smelling like smoke from cooking fires, incense from temples, public toilet funk wafting on the breeze. Oh, and dead animals. People just left those lying around. If a dog dropped dead there, someone might just throw a cloth over it and walk off. And don't forget, public performances, random brawls, surprise protests, or a politician's parade that jams traffic for hours, while trumpet players blast off key right in your face. Yep, Roman streets are alive and waiting for you. Trip, get run over by a runaway cart, or accidentally offend some noble's pet monkey, and your day might end faster than Caesar's on the Ides of March, and you're just trying to buy lentils. You're sweating, dusty, and craving something cold. Good news, you live in Rome, famous for its aqueducts. These glorious engineering feats bring fresh water from the hills right into the empire's heart. Bad news, water doesn't care about you unless you're rich enough to have a private fountain. You're sharing water with thousands of neighbors who cough, sneeze, and skip hand washing. Your choices: the public fountain, where everyone fills jugs, washes feet, and occasionally dunks their water into kids' water for fun or hygiene. And speaking of hygiene, we mean the wet version of hope. Wanna bathe? Your best bet is the thermae, the Roman public baths. They're everywhere and everyone uses them. Something cool, like fresh water. The good news, you live in Rome, a city famous for its aqueducts. These magnificent engineering wonders brought fresh water straight from the hills into the heart of the empire. The bad news, water doesn't care about you unless you're rich enough to have a private fountain. You're sharing water with thousands of neighbors who cough, sneeze, and skip hand washing. Your options: public fountains, where everyone fills their jars, washes their feet, and occasionally dunks their kids' water for fun or hygiene. And by hygiene, we mean the wet version of hope. If you want a proper bath, your best bet is the thermae, the Roman public baths. They were everywhere, and everyone used them. Sounds civilized, right? But here's the catch. Water was recycled through multiple pools with no soap, no chlorine, and minimal fuss. You'd sit in warm baths with dozens of other men, none of whom believed in modesty. The conversations were loud, political, and sometimes a bit raw. One guy might try to sell you socks while another cleaned his ears with a stick. And the water, it was fully saturated with everyone's business. If you wanted to feel special, well, good luck with that. Another one's busy digging earwax with a stick, and water, well, it's soaked through everyone. If you're hoping to feel clean, think again. You're basically marinating in a bacteria stew with a hint of eucalyptus. Oh, and here's a fun fact. Their pipes were mostly made of lead. Yep, lead. The Romans loved engineering, but chemistry, not so much, over time. This fancy plumbing could cause all sorts of lovely side effects like anemia, gout, infertility, and if you're really lucky, full-on madness. Want something safer to drink alcohol? Seriously, water was suspect, especially in poorer areas where toilet and street waste pollution was common. So, folks diluted their booze and everyone, men, women, kids, sipped it all day long. Because what's a better survival hack in a crumbling empire than a nice little buzz? Yep. Rome brought water into the city long before most of the world even knew what pipes were. But for the average Joe, drinking, bathing, or washing your feet was a gamble. Enjoy your sewer system. Don't trust it. Welcome to the Roman Empire, where pain wasn't just possible, it was the soundtrack of your life. You stub your toe, no rocks, no painkillers. You grit your teeth and keep going until it heals or falls off. Broken bones. Wrap it in a dirty rag and try not to breathe too hard. Got a splinter? Good luck. That's how infections start, and how you might just end up sick. Roman society didn't care about comfort. No fancy tools, no cushy seats, no concept of taking it easy. If you were a worker, you hauled bricks with a stick and a prayer. A soldier, you marched 20 miles a day with bleeding feet and scorpion bites on your thighs. A woman giving birth, welcome to Pain Central. Your midwife might know a magic chant. That's it. One tiny slip-up on your body could turn into an open wound or a cautionary tale, unless you lived near a temple with a super devoted priest. Your best bet was homemade ointments, herbal smoke, or just ignoring it until it sorted itself out. Or you ended up 6 feet under. No anesthesia here, surgery. You screamed into a block of wood, dislocated shoulder. A guy named Marcus popped it back in after learning from other people's failures. Dental work. Imagine a blacksmith now imagine your mouth. Yep, that's the scene. And if you were a slave or dirt poor, no one even pretended to care. You could be bleeding on the roadside, and the best you could do was not mess up the mosaic tiles. Even Rome's elite saw pain as proof of virtue. Stoicism was the philosophy of the day. Suffering without whining was noble. Cry over a broken arm. You weren't just hurt, you were weak. Romans really did tough it out in silence, then wrote poetry about it. Yeah, pain was always there, often unannounced, untreatable, and definitely unsympathetic, with that cheerful outlook. Let's see what happens when you actually visit a Roman doctor. So you've hurt yourself. Maybe it's an infected blister from yesterday's work, or you tried shaving with a bronze blade, and now your chin looks like a gladiator's training ground. Either way, it's time to seek medical care in ancient Rome. This was less about curing and more about surviving the attempt. Let's start with the basics. Roman medicine was a chaotic mix of Greek theory, mystical guesswork, and a surprising amount of herbal leaves. The core belief: your body's run by 4 fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Feeling off? One of those is out of whack, always lurking, and it usually shows up unannounced, with no cure and definitely no sympathy. With that sunny outlook, let's see what happens when you actually visit a Roman doctor. So, you've managed to hurt yourself. Maybe an infected blister from yesterday's grind, or you tried shaving with a bronze blade, and now your chin looks like a gladiator's training ground, a bronze razor. And now your chin looks like a gladiator training ground. Either way, it's time to seek medical care. In ancient Rome, that didn't mean healing, it meant surviving the attempt. Let's start with the basics. Roman medicine was a chaotic mashup of Greek theory, mystical guesswork, and a surprising amount of herbal mumbo jumbo, the core belief. Your body's ruled by four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, feeling off. One of those is out of whack. The fix: drain all the fluids. So your doctor, barber or not, would immediately whip out leeches or a knife because bloodletting was the go-to fix. The default treatment for everything from headaches to moral decay. Got a cough, let's open a vein. Depression. We'll suck the sadness right out of your arm. Surgery. Oh yeah, that was a thing. Roman surgeons had scalpels, forceps, even bone drills. What they didn't have was anesthesia. You stayed wide awake the whole time, gripping the edge of a wooden table while some guy in a filthy togas stabbed your flesh with the confidence of someone who'd skimmed a manual once. Disinfectants, basically useless. They might rinse your wound with wine or vinegar, which helped a bit but also felt like divine punishment. Infection, oh, just a casual side effect. Death, also on the menu. Remedies varied wildly. You might get honey, garlic, crushed beetles, or a herbal salve mixed with ash and some very specific animal poops. If things went south, you'd crash in a temple, pray to Asclepius, and hope some divine dream handed you a cure. And if nothing worked, your doc would just shrug, your family lit a candle, and the neighbors started whispering about your death omen. Romans cared about health. They just couldn't tell what actually helped and what made things worse. So next time you sneeze, be thankful for modern antibiotics and that you're not living in a world where healing usually kicked off with losing blood after a long day sweating, bleeding, and dodging carts. You're starving. Dinner time, or as the Romans called it, cena. Don't expect anything comforting from afar. Let's start with what won't be on your table. No pizza, no pasta, no tomatoes, no potatoes, no chocolate, no sugar, and absolutely no coffee. None of those had been discovered or imported yet. This isn't Italian cuisine. It's the edible survival guide of pre-Roman Italians. You sit down with a wooden bowl of something brown and kinda warm, maybe porridge made from wheat, beans, or lentils. If you're lucky, it tastes like wet gravel with a hint of herbs. If you're unlucky, just wet gravel, no herbs, protein super rare unless you caught or trapped it yourself. Meat was expensive, and even if you managed to buy some, it often went bad. Romans didn't have fridges, so preserving meant salting, smoking, or dunking it in garum. Garum was a fermented fish sauce that smelled like a dead ocean and burned your soul just thinking about it. If you're feeling fancy, maybe some boiled veggies, hard cheese, or occasionally figs. Wealthy Romans liked weird treats like roasted flamingo, stuffed dormice, or jellyfish with vinegar. Fancy food basically screamed, "Look how rich I am, and how little I care about taste." Your wine was always watered down. Drinking it straight was considered barbaric, but don't worry, the water was probably sketchy too, so you just picked your poison speed. Dessert? Maybe dried fruit nuts. Or maybe you were fasting because it was a festival day honoring some god who hated overeating. Either way, tiramisu was not on the menu. No napkins either. You wiped your hands on a cloth shared with 10 other people, or just used your tunic and pretended it was clean. By the end of the meal, your stomach was full but uneasy. Your breath smelled like garlic, wine, and mild desperation. But hey, at least you ate. Now all you gotta do is survive Rome's nightlife. And trust me, it's not a relaxing stroll. After a dusty, grueling day full of fish sauce, you might be craving some chill vibes to forget your crumbling apartment and the open sewer outside. Good news, you're in Rome, the city of entertainment. Bad news, most of it's horrifying. Let's start with the main event, the Roman Colosseum, the crown jewel of Roman engineering and the place where your soul quietly goes to die. This is where crowds gathered to watch men stab each other for fun. Wild animals ate criminals. And the table? Yes. The good news, you're in Rome, the entertainment capital. The bad news, most of it's horrifying. Let's start with the main event, the Roman Colosseum, the crown jewel of Roman engineering and the place where your soul quietly dies. This is where crowds gather to watch men stab each other for fun, wild animals eating criminals, and sometimes, if the emperor felt dramatic, full naval battles reenacted with real water and real drownings. Attendance was free, which sounds generous until you realize it's free because the state wants you distracted while the Senate hikes taxes and quietly annexes Armenia. You cram in with sweaty strangers, cheering as a gladiator loses his life. There's blood, sand, and sometimes public executions with extra flair. You clap. You have no idea why. Feeling a bit touchy, like theater, come to the arena for a Roman play. Could be a tragedy written in, or a quick joke about someone pretending to defile Jupiter with a sausage. Subtlety. Not exactly a Roman strong suit. If sports are more your speed, try Circus Maximus. Chariot races are fast, thrilling, and usually deadly. No guardrails, no helmets, and a whole lot of screaming. Crashes, inevitable, and spectacular. The crowd loves it. They're here for the violence and the betting. Don't cheer for the wrong team unless you're ready to fight your way home. And then there's street entertainment fire breathers, acrobats, musicians, circus acts, and the occasional barefoot philosopher with nothing to lose. If you don't like the show, wait 5 minutes. Something or someone else will start yelling soon enough. But beneath all that, there's a weird, sharp kind of madness. Rome wasn't just distracting people. It overwhelmed them so much they forgot how brutal daily life really was. It turned spectacle into a weapon. And if that's not enough to numb you, there was always more wine. Now, let's talk justice, Roman style. Spoiler alert. It's not pretty. You survived work, dinner, and a gladiator getting skewered to applause. You might think you're safe now. Just keep quiet, and the law will protect you. Oh, how adorable. In Rome, the law doesn't protect you. It reminds you you're tiny, replaceable, and mercy is a luxury for emperors only. First off, your legal status matters. If you're a citizen, you have rights, theoretically. You can't be publicly whipped unless some bigwig is really annoyed and you get a decent trial. If you're not a citizen, justice shows up as a fist, a branded iron, or a quick execution outside the city gates. Slaves were property. If a slave killed their master, even if it was well-deserved, all the slaves in that household could be executed as a warning. Don't dwell on that message. If you're accused, don't expect a calm chat with a lawyer. This is a public trial. The richer side brings witnesses, bribes, and dramatic flair. You bring your toga and the feeling that you're about to sink. Crying on the witness stand might help. No patron pray to Jupiter and hope the judge isn't drunk. Punishments weren't just about pain, they were warnings. Thieves could be branded or have their hands broken. Liars might get their tongues pierced, whipped publicly, or exiled if lucky. And if you insulted the emperor, forget jail. That's death, usually with a creative twist. Some crimes demanded public punishment, ideally in front of a crowd louder than a morning beheading. Crucifixion was common long, slow, humiliating, not just for Jesus, but for rebels, bandits, and anyone the state wanted to make an example of. And remember, law enforcement wasn't there to help. Firefighters and cops in Rome, underpaid, overworked, and usually corrupt. If you got robbed, they might just shrug. If you bribed them, they might help you rob someone else. Yeah, Rome had laws carved in stone and announced in forums, but they served power, not justice. Now, let's talk gods, because here, you don't just obey men, you're on Jupiter's turf. After dodging Rome's streets and justice, you might hope for comfort in religion. Some peace, some personal spirituality. Oh, nope, not here. In the Roman Empire, religion wasn't private. It was a whole organization, a cloud of incense, and a constant weight of responsibility over every tongue lashings, public beatings, or exile if you're lucky. And if you offend, the emperor jails off the table. It's death, often creatively done. Some crimes demand public punishment, ideally in front of a crowd louder than a morning guillotine execution. Crucifixion was popular as a long, slow, humiliating, not just for Jesus. It was for rebels, thieves, and anyone the state wanted to make an example of. And remember, law enforcement didn't help. These processions were like Rome's firefighters and police, underpaid, overworked, and usually corrupt. Got robbed. They'll probably shrug, bribe them. They might help you rob someone else. Yeah, Rome had laws carved in stone, read in forums, but they served power, not justice. Now, let's talk gods, because here, you don't just obey men, you're on. They might help you rob someone else. Yeah, Rome had laws carved in stone, read out loud in forums. But those laws, they served power, not justice. Now, let's talk gods, because here, you don't just obey men, you're on Jupiter's turf. After dodging Roman law and surviving the streets, you might hope for some comfort in religion, a little peace of mind, a touch of personal spirituality. Nope, not here. In the Roman Empire, religion wasn't a personal thing. It was an institution, a cloud of incense, and a responsibility constantly hanging over every moment of your life. You don't pick your gods, the gods pick you, and there were a ton of gods. Everything had a god in charge. Door hinges, stair doors, sewers, holes, borders, endpoints, even mold. You can't take 5 steps without passing a shrine. If you don't stop to bow, light a candle, or mumble a prayer, you're not just being rude, you're inviting disaster. Maybe not today, but someday. Ah yes, he skipped the Saturnalia offering. Religious festivals are packed all year round, dozens a year. On those days, business grinds to a halt, animals get sacrificed, and the air smells like roasted cow and wet marble. You show up out of piety, but mostly out of fear. because if the gods aren't properly worshipped, they'll get revenge with plague, drought, or a lousy harvest messing up everyone's lentil supply. Now, about emperor worship, the state wants you to worship the emperor, not just as a ruler, but as a living god. You're expected to burn incense at his altar, sing his praises, and never, ever roll your eyes at a triumphal parade. That's treason. If you're caught skipping public ceremonies, keeping quiet at the Vesta festival, or missing the chance to throw grain into the temple fire, you could be labeled godless, atheist, or worst of all, suspicious. Suspicion in Rome is like blood in shark-infested waters, and if you're part of a foreign cult, better keep it hush-hush unless officially approved. The state hates strange gods unless they bring wine, taxes, or fresh recruits. Roman religion is not about belief. It's about ritual. You don't have to feel it. You just have to do it right, on time, and in public. And you better smile while sacrificing the goat. Speaking of social performance, let's climb the dizzying heights of Roman ambition in the next chapter. You bowed to the gods, dodged a lawsuit, and survived a public bath without catching some mysterious disease. But here comes the exhausting part of Roman life, the social hierarchy, a brutal machine, finely tuned, where every word, gesture, and sandal placement could make or break you. Roman society was like a ladder, but greased and lined with daggers. At the top were the senators, old-school nobles, guys in purple stripes, and landowners so vast they had their own zip codes. Below them, the equestrians, rich businessmen, then the commoners like you, the struggling middle and lower classes. Underneath, the freedmen, slaves, foreigners, and that guy who accidentally insulted Augustus's statue. Want to climb up, you'll need patrons, powerful individuals who protect you in exchange for lifetime loyalty, errands, favors, and sometimes a vote, like having a boss, a godfather, and a landlord all wrapped into one charming yet condescending package. Every morning you visit your patron as part of your greeting ritual. You line up with other clients, compliment his haircut, maybe praise his son's toga, then beg for a favor, usually money, food, or a hookup if you're lucky. He tosses a coin your way and lets you carry his litter through the forum. Congratulations, you're connected now. Every move you make is watched and judged. Your clothes must be clean, not trendy, just clean. Your words proper at all times. Your friends carefully chosen, and whatever you do, don't show ambition. That freaks people out. Climb too fast, and rivals will plot to take you down socially and literally. Networking is war. Gossip is currency. One wrong comment at a party could end your career. The right marriage can save your family line, but better play it safe. Poets get the love. The rest of Rome marries for alliances and property inheritance. And even if you make it to the top, don't get cocky. One bad harvest, one missed ritual, a jealous rival, and it's all over. You won't even hear the dagger come out. Ordinary folks like you, middle and lower classes struggling. Below them are freedmen, slaves, foreigners, and also the guy who accidentally offended Augustus's statue. Want to climb the ladder, you'll need patrons, powerful people, protecting you in exchange for lifelong loyalty, odd jobs, favors, and sometimes a vote, like having a boss, a godfather, and a landlord all rolled into one charming yet condescending package every morning. You visit your patron's house as part of the greeting ritual. You line up with other clients, compliment his hairstyle, maybe praise his son's toga, then beg for a favor, usually cash, food, or an introduction. If you're lucky, he'll toss you a coin and let you carry his litter across the forum. Congrats, you're connected. Every move you make is watched and judged. Your clothes must be clean, not fashionable, just clean. Your words must be proper. Your friends carefully chosen. And whatever you do, don't show ambition. That freaks people out. If you rise too fast, others will plot to take you down, socially or literally. Socializing is warfare. Gossip is currency. One wrong comment at a party can end your career. A good marriage might save your entire bloodline, but best play it safe. Love's for poets. The rest of Rome marries for alliances and property inheritance. And even if you climb high, don't get cocky. A bad harvest, a missed ritual, an envious rival, and it's over. You won't even hear the dagger coming. Now the sun's setting. Surely things calm down at night. Right? Nope. Not in Rome. The sun dips below Rome's rooftops, and for a fleeting moment, you think, maybe now I can finally rest. But nightfall in the Roman Empire isn't peacetime. It's the shift from noisy chaos to gloom and deadly business. First, the light. There's none, unless you're rich enough to afford it. Rome's official night guards were supposed to patrol the streets, fight fires, and stop crime. But in reality, they were overworked, underpaid, and mostly loved sleeping in more than playing hero. Some were brave, some were easily bribed, and all were heavily outnumbered. Criminals knew this. Thieves, robbers, and occasionally bored gladiators lurked in the dark looking for easy targets. Walking home alone, congrats, you're the easy target, no matter who you are, unless you're armed, fast, or invisible. You're in trouble. Then there's fire, the biggest nightmare of Roman nights. Insulate those deadly apartment traps you call home were made of wood and dreams. Cooking after dark was illegal for this very reason, but laws meant zero to a starving tenant. An overturned lamp could turn a whole block to ashes in hours. The Great Fire of 64 AD, not an accident, but once it started, it raged like an angry planet Mars. You'd think your building was safe until midnight smoke hits your nose and you realize there's no evacuation plan. You grab your cloak, your chamber pot, and maybe your dignity, then sprint down collapsing stairs. If fire or thieves don't get you, noise will. Drunken parties echo through the streets. Mysterious god processions parade with drums and cheers. And if a senator's mistress is upset, well, everyone within 3 blocks knows sleep in ancient Rome is a luxury. Silence a myth. Safety only for the rich, armed or insanely lucky. But hey, dawn's coming. Just survive one more night and do it all again. The sun sets over Rome, and with it, you might hope for a peaceful moment, a gentle breeze, a quiet meal, maybe even some sleep. Think again. Rome doesn't do quiet nights. It just switches to something darker, louder, and more dangerous. The city never really sleeps. It prowls. Let's start with fire, Roman buildings, especially those tall wooden tenements where the poor lived, were basically tinder boxes waiting for a careless oil lamp or cooking flame to turn them to ash. No real fire brigade, just guards doubling as firefighters, night watchmen, and low-paid janitors. They carried buckets and hope. If your apartment caught fire, you might get saved or you might just become tomorrow's cautionary tale. Then there were thieves and pickpockets, treating moonlight like a hunting license. Rome's alleys were narrow and dark. Torches were expensive. If you had to walk after dark, you moved by feel, by instinct, and prayed it wasn't you. Don't carry anything shiny. Don't make eye contact. And whatever you do, don't get stuck between two drunk gladiators arguing over someone's lost sandal. Speaking of drunk, the city's nightlife was booming. Taverns overflowed with cheap drinks, wine, loud music, men yelling terrible poems about Mars, and women they'd never impress. Fights broke out. Dice games ended in blood. Sometimes an angry noble sent a slave to rough someone up on the street. You hide in shadows and pretend you see nothing. If you're a woman walking alone, good luck. Rome wasn't kind to unprotected women after dark. The streets belonged to the desperate, the reckless, and the dangerously bored. Angry. You might think your building's safe until you smell smoke at midnight and realize there's no evacuation plan. You grab your cloak, your chamber pot, maybe your pride, and bolt down collapsing stairs. And if it's not fire or thieves, it's noise. Drunken parties echo through the streets. Processions of mysterious gods parade with drums and cheers. And if a senator's mistress is upset, everyone within 3 blocks knows sleep in ancient Rome is a luxury. Silence is a myth. Safety only belongs to the rich, the armed, and the insanely lucky. But hey, dawn's coming. Just survive one more night and repeat. The sun sets on Rome, and with it, you might hope for a quiet moment. Oh, soft breeze, a peaceful meal, maybe even sleep. Think again. Rome doesn't quiet down at night. It just switches to something darker, louder, and dangerous. The city never truly sleeps. It stalks. Let's start with fire. Roman buildings, especially the towering wooden tenements where the poor live. Are tinderboxes waiting for a careless oil lamp or cooking fire to turn them into ash? No real fire brigade, just watchmen who double as firefighters, night guards, and poorly paid janitors. They carry buckets and hope. If your apartment, firefighters who doubled as night guards and low-paid street sweepers, they carried buckets and hope. If your apartment caught fire, you might get saved, or you might just become tomorrow's cautionary tale. Then there were the thieves, pickpockets treating moonlight like a hunting license. Rome's alleys were narrow and dark. No streetlights. Torches were expensive. If you had to walk after dark, you followed your gut, your instincts, and hoped not to be dinner. Don't carry anything shiny. Don't make eye contact. And whatever you do, please don't get stuck between two guys. Drunk gladiators arguing over someone's missing sandal. Speaking of drunk, the city's nightlife was popping off. Taverns overflowed with cheap booze, wine, loud music, men yelling bad poems about Mars, and women they'd never impress. Fights broke out. Dice games ended in bloodshed. And sometimes, an angry noble decided to settle a score by sending slaves to beat someone up in the street. You'd hide in the shadows and pretend you saw nothing. If you were a woman walking alone, good luck. Rome wasn't kind to unprotected women after dark. The streets belonged to the desperate, the reckless, and the dangerously bored. Trying to sleep was no better. Your house creaked as if it was thinking about collapsing. Rats scurried inside the walls. Your neighbor coughed like a dying goat. Somewhere nearby, someone was screaming, maybe mad, maybe murderous, maybe both. You bury your face in a sweat-soaked pillow and pray to Mercury for some peace and quiet. But silence, forget it. Not in Rome, not for you, because in the Roman Empire, even the darkness is noisy, and when dawn comes, you get to do it all over again. You wake up in a wreck, survived the public toilets, the horse carts, traffic jams, gladiator bloodbaths, lead poisoning, leeches, religious festivals, roofs burning down, and lentils soaked in funky fermented fish sauce. You bow down to gods you don't even get, follow laws that don't have your back, and nap through riots, sewer rats, and the occasional public beheading. You're filthy, exhausted, probably infected, and emotionally scarred by the communal sponge. And that's just day one. Can you handle more? Honestly, no, you won't. Most modern humans, blessed with AC, antibiotics, and 5-minute delivery windows, fooled by lunch, you'd tap out before Garam's second round. Yet, the Romans did this for centuries, because here's the maddeningly awesome part. Amid all this filth, brutality, and noise, Rome somehow kept running. They built cities, roads, aqueducts, libraries, temples, and arenas. They expanded their empire across continents. They wrote laws, developed philosophy, mapped the stars, performed surgeries, and invented concrete, stuff that outlasts most modern buildings. They created systems that shaped Europe and beyond for 2,000 years. Latin became the root of half the languages you hear today. Their architecture inspired cathedrals, parliaments, and university campuses. Their political ideas, republics, senates, veto powers still echo in modern democracies, but it came at a steep price for everyday Romans, not emperors lounging in marble baths. Daily life was a brutal grind, yet they endured. They adapted, so they had no choice, because Rome wasn't built of gold. It was made from sweat, fear, ambition, and survival, layer by layer, person by person, bloody century after century. And that's why it lasted. You'd beg for modern plumbing and antihistamines by mid-afternoon. You'd trade your whole sack of denarii for a hot shower and a chair with a backrest. And that's okay. You don't have to survive ancient Rome. You just have to understand it. And maybe, just maybe, appreciate that somewhere. Someone once walked those filthy streets and helped build that empire. So today, you can sit here, clean, safe, and a little horrified. Now imagine you're a Parthian princess in the 2nd century BCE. You carry royal blood, a name worthy of legend, Rodigan. And more importantly, you live in a world where your family spends more time fighting rebels than throwing dinner parties. Rodigan wasn't born into peace and pearls. She was born into guts, horses, and a constant fear that someone might poison your lover. Her dad, Mithridates the Sioux, wasn't some idolized king. He turned Parthia from a dusty backwater into a powerhouse empire, one day destined to take on Rome. But expansion brought problems, rebellions, betrayals, and neighbors who refused to accept your army now owns their backyard. As a kid, Rodigon probably grew up watching envoys argue, commanders sketch, maps in the sand, and palace scribes trying to keep track of who's loyal this week. She wasn't trained in silk and etiquette. She learned statecraft, command, and how to wear armor without clashing with her earrings. It's key to understand Parthian women's role here, though often overlooked. Parthian noblewomen were no strangers to power. Some ruled cities, others schemed dynastic alliances, and a few, like Rodigan, became legends, not for the men they married, but for the men they defeated. Expansion came with problems, rebellions, betrayals, and neighbors who just wouldn't accept that. Your army now owned their backyard, growing up. Rodigon probably saw diplomats bickering, commanders sketching, maps in the sand, and palace clerks trying to keep track of who was loyal this week. She wasn't schooled in silk and ceremony. She learned statecraft, command, and how to wear armor without clashing with. Her earrings. It's important to understand the role of Parthian women here. Not always noticed, but Parthian noblewomen were no strangers to power. Some ruled cities, others schemed royal alliances, and a few, like Rodigon, became legends, not because of who they married, but who they defeated. And she did defeat, but that part comes later. At this point in her life, Rodigon's name was already known. She wasn't just a royal heir, but the pride of Parthia. She carried the hopes of marrying a king or becoming a king in spirit. She seemed restless watching cities burn or provinces rebel, while most royal ladies soaked in perfume and scented oils. Rodigon was probably brushing up on military reports and palace logistics. She had zero time for vanity, and, as fate would have it, one day she swore off shampooing until the rebellion was crushed. Spoiler alert, it took a while, but before we get to that dusty crown moment, we need to understand what kind of rebellion dares to provoke a princess who'd rather lead armies than deck herself out in gold. The Parthian Empire, grand as it looked on the map, was more duct tape than marble, stretching from the Persian Gulf all the way to the edge of Mesopotamia and beyond. It was held together by marriages, oaths, and occasionally a sword pressed to someone's throat. So when a rebellion flared up in the western provinces, maybe Media or Babylonia, it wasn't exactly shocking. What was shocking was how bold the rebels got. They weren't just disgruntled tax dodgers. They were legit nobles and city leaders, mad at the central government and probably fueled by youth or the absence of a male royal enforcer. They didn't just throw a tantrum. They seized fortresses, silenced Parthian envoys, and basically told the royal family to go polish their crowns. Now, under normal circumstances, the king would send a general or some overly ambitious cousin with a small brain. But these were not normal times, for reasons historians still bicker about: timing, logistics, royal drama. Rodigon herself took command, and not just in some abstract, I'll approve battle plans way. No, she saddled up, donned armor, and publicly swore what would become a legend. She wouldn't wash, brush, or do a thing with her hair until the rebellion was crushed. Bold move, dramatic, really, honestly, a nightmare for the court hairdressers. But that vow, as dramatic as it sounds, wasn't vanity. It was a statement, a visual symbol tying her personal dignity to the empire's fate. Every time someone caught sight of her wild, dust-covered hair, they'd be reminded, this fight isn't over until we win. And it worked. The troops rallied. The army didn't just see a princess. They saw a general willing to let her beauty fade for war. She was the embodiment of Parthian grit, not relying on a throne, but on thorns, dust, and sweat. Meanwhile, the rebels probably didn't know whether to laugh or freak out. They expected a general, maybe a diplomat. Instead, they got a scruffy, fierce woman galloping straight to their gates with steel in her eyes and zero shampoo plans. Worse, she was dead serious. When Radagon left the capital, she wasn't escorted by a lavish court parade or showered with rose petals. She was flanked by cavalry and courage and the heavy weight of an empire ready to crush rebels like rotten figs, and she looked every bit the part. Every trace of courtly elegance vanished. Her famously wild hair started growing wilder, waving like a battle flag of war determination. In a world obsessed with appearances, she turned hers into a weapon. The campaign wasn't quick. This wasn't a one-off siege solved with bribes and battering rams. Rebel cities were fortified and confident. They expected hesitation from the central government, not a battle-hardened woman charging through the dust with blazing eyes. But Rodigan didn't flinch. Her military instincts were sharp, probably sharper than most men's. She stuck to classic Pathian tactics mobility, feigned retreats, and hit-and-run attacks. Her forces would show up on a rebel-held city's edge, vanish like smoke, then pop back up from a surprise flank days later, confident. They expected hesitation from the central government, not a battle-hardened woman charging through, dust with fire in her eyes. But Rodigan didn't flinch. Her military instincts were sharp, probably sharper than most men. The men were behind her. She used classic Parthian tactics mobility, fake retreats, and hit-and-run attacks. Her forces would pop up at the edge of a rebel-held city, vanish like smoke, then reappear from a surprise flank the next day. Reports say her soldiers admired her not just as a symbol, but as a strategist. She didn't march behind the ranks. She was out front, dirt under her nails, and fury under her helmet. And as weeks went by, so did her hair. By month 3, it reportedly knotted into ropes of dust, sweat, and battlefield prayers, but all that just made her scarier to her enemies, and even more worshipped by her man. The rebels called her the Witch Queen, not because she cast spells, but because no noblewoman should be fighting in fields and refusing to wash. They figured something unnatural must be going on, but there was no magic, just relentless, hardcore discipline. By the time her army laid siege to the rebels' last stronghold, the legend spread faster than the uprising itself. Whether in taverns or camps, soldiers joked the enemy wasn't scared of Pathian swords. They feared Rodigon would never wash again, and honestly, they weren't totally wrong. The rebels' last fortress came into view, a walled city, rumored to be untouchable, with leaders tunneling like badgers, supplies stocked up, archers lined the battlements, gates reinforced with the kind of smug confidence only traitors have. They believed they'd outlast Rodigon. Big mistake. Now, her reputation was legendary. Rumors didn't just spread across the empire, they seeped into enemy lands. The woman who refuses to wash. They whispered. Some said her hair had turned to iron. Others swore she hadn't slept in weeks. Legends piled up like siege ladders. But Rodigan wasn't a myth. She was real and tactical. Instead of rushing in recklessly, she chose a slow, painful siege, cutting off trade routes, blocking messengers, poisoning wells. The rebels geared up for sword fights, but got starvations instead. She turned time into a weapon, letting the enemy rot from the inside out. Meanwhile, she camped outside the city with her troops, just another commander under canvas, sharing meals, hard bread, and warm wine, checking armor, leading patrols, and against all odds, refusing to touch a comb. To her soldiers, that oath became sacred. No one dared joke about her breaking it. She became the living embodiment of Pathian pride, a symbol showing their suffering wasn't for nothing. Every tangled lock a reminder we're still in this fight. Inside the rebel city, morale crumbled. They'd hoped to break the enemy's spirit with persistence. Instead, they started cracking first. Commanders bickered, supplies dwindled, rumors of desertion spread like cracks in stone. Then, the breaking point came. An unmanned side gate, left open for maybe exhaustion or sabotage, was spotted by one of Rodigon's scouts. That night, under cover of darkness and wind, her forces slipped in and opened the main gate from inside. By dawn, the city was hers, and Rodigan, sweaty, dusty, unwashed, stood atop the walls, victorious and terrifying. The victory wasn't announced with trumpets or parades. It was declared with water. After months of grime, fighting, and endless chasing, Rodigon faced her army not in royal finery, but in the same battle gear she'd worn since day one, her armor thick with rebel sword marks, her face weathered by sun and stress, her hair wild, filthy, now flowing down her back like a lion's mane made of steel and legend. But she did it. Every rebel city fell, every oath breaker was crushed. The throne, and now that the oath was fulfilled, she could finally do what no one in the Empire dared to do. She could wash her hair, according to tradition and later gossip. Rodigon, the throne. And now that her oath was done, she could finally do what no one in the Empire dared. She could wash her hair, according to tradition and later whispered records. Rodigan didn't summon her servants to a golden room, but a public courtyard. She wanted her soldiers, those who'd bled, beside her, to witness this moment. Basins were filled, oils warmed, combs pulled out like sacred relics. And then, under the open sky, the warrior princess of Parthia, covered in the dirt of war, began to, wiping away months of rebellion, symbolic stuff. Every tangle cleared was a city taken back. Every rinse of water over her scalp washed away defiance, soaking into the ground like the land itself was healing. Some say she cried, others say she laughed, but no one argues about the soldiers' silence as they watched. Tough, scarred, sunburned men stood frozen like statues when Rodigon appeared after her transformation ceremony. No crown on her head. She didn't need one. Dust was her crown now. Not washing her hair was mightier than any jewel. And in that moment, Pathea didn't just have a princess, it had an icon. She could have marched back to court in triumph, letting clerks pen flowery poems, nobles sing her praises, but she wasn't in a rush to return to luxury. She stayed with her troops a while longer. She dined with them. She listened to them. She knew her legend was just starting, but she didn't want it forgotten. She wanted it forged in memory. After the head washing became a multi-generational event, Rodigan could have ridden straight to the capital with banners, flags, and enough propaganda to last a century, but she didn't. Instead, she took the long road home, deliberately visiting every city she'd reclaimed, walking the streets, checking defenses, making sure no rebellious embers still smoldered under the ashes. This wasn't just a routine ritual, it was strategy. Rodigon knew the danger of victory. It can quickly turn into complacency. Empires don't fall just because they lose battles. They fall because they forget why they were fighting in the first place. She wanted both rebels and loyalists to understand. Pathea's strength wasn't just cavalry and cash. You could see it in her presence. A woman who chose hardship over comfort, winning loyalty by example, not orders, and she got that loyalty wherever she went. People gathered not to gawk at royalty, but to stare in awe, unpolished. No perfume, just real. She didn't bring fear. She brought accountability. She demanded reports, heard complaints, and paid for supplies out of her war chest. She rewarded cities that stayed loyal and cautious, and mercifully spared the repentant. When she finally reached the royal palace, her return became a stop legend. Chroniclers scrambled to write her story. Artists debated how to portray her wild, weary hair or radiant and reborn. Ministers whispered about the implications. A woman commanding armies, keeping promises, standing at the heart of Pathea's power with half the provinces loyal in her hand. And here's the dilemma. What do you do with a princess more beloved than most kings? Some pushed her to marry, as if that would contain her influence. Others wanted her to take the long-term border defense job. But Rodigan didn't seem to care about titles or politics. She'd proven what she needed to prove. The battlefield was her throne. Dust, crown, and name etched deep in the hearts of soldiers and citizens alike. No royal decree she didn't need a coronation. She'd been crowned, not with gold, but with history. In the months after her campaign, Rhodogon didn't chase attention, but attention clung to her anyway. She became the subject of poems, sculptures, gossip, and awe. Not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Every soldier who fought under her command returned with a story, and every story made her bigger, tougher, and untouchable. But inside Pathea's palace, she drew attention, but the attention stuck to her. She became the subject of poetry, sculpture, gossip, and awe, not because she demanded it, but because she earned it. Every soldier who fought under her command came back with a story, and every story made her bigger, tougher, and untouchable. But inside the Pathea Palace, where politics slither like snakes behind silk curtains, her silence worried people. She didn't brag. She didn't lobby. She didn't demand titles or land. Instead, she watched, listened, and understood that the real battlefield just moved from stone walls to whispered conversations. Even the king, her father, or maybe her brother, depending on the exact moment in Patheon's complicated timeline, had to exist where it mattered most among the people. She might not wear a crown, but she ruled in ways no crown ever could. Tread carefully. Rhodogon wasn't just famous. She was respected in a way most men in the court could only dream of, not worshipped for looks or royal blood, but for leadership, for command. She turned her oath into policy, her grit into folklore, but the silence she kept was as deliberate as any military maneuver. She didn't spill her next move, probably because she didn't even know it herself. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting. No leading armies, no outsmarting rebels. She stood still, and that quiet freaked people out. What does a victorious woman without a crown do next? Some historians guess Rhodogon used this silence as a power play. Just her presence. Every nod, every sly glance was a command. Officials hesitated to push bad policies for fear of a frown. Generals stalled campaigns, hoping she'd speak up. Her silence wasn't passive, it was a weapon. She'd figured out that saying nothing could pack more punch than shouting orders. So there she was, a living legend roaming the palace halls. Her freshly washed hair wasn't just braided with gold thread, but with memories. Her very existence challenged norms. She proved Pathion's power wasn't just in men's hands. It could charge into battle with wild hair and return with cities at its feet. And all she had to do now was wait, because sometimes the biggest move is doing nothing at all. Over time, Rhodogon's name faded in official records. Pathion chroniclers were way more eager to boost kings and dynasties than rebellious warrior princesses. So they downplayed her campaigns. The silence she once wielded as a weapon became a reason to erase her. No grand cathedrals bore her name. No epic poems commissioned by the state immortalized her on gilded scrolls. But that's the fun thing about true legends. They don't need permission to exist. At the outposts where her troops marched, in villages where she spared lives, her name was still whispered. Mothers told tales of her to their daughters, not as fairy tales, but as warnings to any man foolish enough to underestimate a woman on a mission. Soldiers studied her tactics like scripture, and rebels, well, decades later, they still talked about her like she might rise from dust with hair flying like a battle flag. There's something genuinely unsettling about someone who breaks every rule of their era and still wins. Rhodogon refused to be palace decoration. She didn't play the flute, paint birds, or master the silent art of being ignored. She burned through time like a comet and then vanished just as fast. Historians debate her fate. Some say she retired from public life, choosing peace over politics. Others think she stayed a shadowy advisor, shaping Pathion's strategy from behind the scenes. The romantics say she rode out one last time to settle border disputes and faded into legend. Never confirmed, never denied. But here's the thing her legacy lives on, where it matters most in people. She might not have worn a crown, but she ruled in ways no crown ever could. She redefined loyalty. She proved that a vow, even a weird one, like refusing to comb your hair, could be as binding as a royal decree and way more inspiring. And even though history books only mention her in a footnote, Pathion's dust still remembers her, because you don't need a marble statue to exist. She might not wear a crown, but she ruled in ways no crown ever could. She redefined loyalty. She proved that a vow, even a weird one like refusing to comb your hair, could bind you tighter than a royal decree and inspire way more. And even though history books barely mention her name in a footnote, the dust of Pathion still remembers her, because you don't need a marble statue to survive eternity. You just need to keep your vow and win. Centuries after she died, Rhodogon's story remains a paradox, widely told but elusive on paper. No towering statue of her stands. No royal tomb praises her in carved stone, but in the collective memory of those who admire rebellion, endurance, and principled ferocity. She's immortal, not the king-remembered kind of immortal, but the kind that lingers like a shadow in the hearts of the people. And principled ferocity. She's immortal, not in the usual kingly let's build statues way, but in the way nature itself remembers. She didn't need to conquer distant lands or sign big treaties. What she conquered was expectations. In a world where women were told to wait behind curtains while men spilled blood for honor, Rhodogon tore down that curtain and stepped out barefoot, helmet in hand. She didn't ask to command. She took command, And the empire didn't collapse. It followed her. More importantly, she taught her people a lesson no decree ever could. Loyalty that didn't come from fear. It came from seeing your leader suffer right alongside you, from watching her choose discipline over comfort, from seeing her keep a vow longer than anyone thought possible. She wasn't perfect, no, legends here, but her story endures precisely because it's messy, muddy, and real, just like her hair on the day of her final victory. In that dirt, there's dignity. In that oath, a vision of leadership, stronger than any title. When the soldiers looked at her, they didn't see a princess. They saw someone who believed in the fight more than her own pride. And that's the part history can't quite erase. Even now, long after Pathia fell and its cities turned to dust. Her name pops up in moments of resistance. Artists bring her back to life. Writers hunt for her footsteps. A vow unwashed until victory. To some, it sounds crazy, but to those fighting injustice, it makes perfect sense. Radagon never cared about charm. She was pure, stubborn will, and in the end, the thing on her head wasn't gold, it was dust. Dust? The same stuff emperors try to escape after death, but what she wore was like a badge of honor, forgotten by kings, ignored by chroniclers, but remembered by dust, and that's where the real legend lives, not in stone, but in earth. Before empires clashed and blood soaked the sand, before kings trembled at her name, Tomias was simply the daughter of the wind, born barefoot. The land she came from wasn't gilded with marble or echoing philosophy. It was brutal, free, and wide open. This was the world of the Massage Tay, fierce nomad archers, rode like spirits of the steppe, their lives shaped by survival, honor, and war. We know little about Tomias's childhood, but we can imagine its rhythm. She likely learned to ride before she could run, to shoot arrows before speaking full sentences. Among the Massage Tay, girls weren't locked in tents or silenced. They trained with boys, rode with warriors, and grew up with iron in their veins. To lead, you had to bleed, and even as a kid, she bled for her people. Her tribe worshipped the sun and sky, lived off livestock, and buried their dead, with weapons ready for the afterlife battle. No cities, no golden temples, but pride. And when enemies came close, they answered not with prayers, but with arrows. Tomias may have taken power after her husband died, who might have ruled the tribe before her. But when that moment came, she didn't inherit power. She grabbed it in a time when most women were property. Tomias commanded an army. She negotiated with kings. She dared to speak as an equal, and if they didn't listen, she made them. She was more than a queen. She was Shahut, the general, clad in bronze and leather, soon to face the greatest empire on earth. But power, especially for women, never comes without a price. As Tomias started to consolidate her power, whispers grew louder. Across the southern mountains, a king was watching. His name was Cyrus the Great, and he wanted more. The stage was set, the wind howled, and Tomiris, daughter of warriors, was about to enter legend. While Tomiris ruled the southern steppes, another kind of power, rising up, structured, tough, and relentless. Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire, had conquered Lydia to the west and Babylon to the south. His banner flew over deserts, mountains, and cities where languages changed every few days' ride. But Cyrus wasn't done yet. He was a builder of empires, and in the end, everyone he built toward the horizon. For Cyrus, the Massage-Te were a threat wrapped in an opportunity. They weren't rolling in gold or cities, but they controlled the northeastern border, which meant they controlled lands, resources, and crucial trade routes. More importantly, the Massage-Te had something no empire could ignore: pride. And in Cyrus's eyes, pride was something you could either bend or break. But Cyrus also knew that brute force wasn't always the best opening move. He was famous for being smart, slick, and a master strategist. So he tried another approach, one kings before him had used to handle threats. Without spilling a drop of blood, he sent a marriage proposal, according to ancient sources, notably Herodotus. Cyrus sent an envoy to Tomyris to propose an alliance by marriage. In theory, this was a royal match: the great king of Persia and the warrior queen of the Massage-Te. But Tomyris wasn't born yesterday. She saw right through that offer. It wasn't about love or cooperation. It was a calculated move to absorb her people without a fight. She said no, and that no wasn't taken lightly at Pedalolis. When the diplomatic game ended, Cyrus switched to his favorite language war. He ordered his army to cross the Araxes River, the natural barrier separating Persia from Massage-Te lands. He planned to take what Tomyris refused to give, but Tomyris was ready. She knew the terrain inside and out. She knew her people fought on horseback, fast and fierce, and above all, she knew Cyrus wasn't just here for land. He came to crush. A woman who dared say no. The most powerful king in the world declared war, but he had no idea what fury he'd just unleashed on this step. Cyrus the Great, a seasoned strategist and battle-hardened conqueror, thought he could beat his enemy. He'd faced kings, destroyed cities, and subdued nations. To him, the Massage-Te were just wild nomads with fast horses and no cities to protect. He didn't realize he was walking into the path of someone way craftier and more vicious. Tomyris warned him after rejecting his proposal. She sent a clear message: cross the Araxes and you'll regret it. But Cyrus crossed anyway, building a boat bridge to bring his army into Massage-Te land. Instead of attacking right away, Tomyris pulled back, luring Cyrus deeper into unfamiliar terrain. The Persians found an abandoned camp stocked with food and, more importantly, wine, a luxury the Massage-Te nomads rarely enjoyed. It was a baited trap, and Cyrus fell for it, probably thinking the enemy was scared and running. Inside the camp, he left part of his army under the command of General Harpagus, a trusted officer. When the Massage-Te returned under cover of night, they struck the drunken, unsuspecting Persians with a deadly precision. The battle was brutal and swift. Among the dead was Spargapises, Tomyris' son and a Massage-Te commander. There are different stories about what happened next. Some say Spargapises was captured and, realizing his fate, begged for death and then killed himself. Others say he died in the fighting. But everyone agrees when the news reached Tomyris. Something inside her shattered and turned to steel. Her grief erupted like a volcano, but her rage became legendary. She sent another message to Cyrus. This wasn't a warning, it was a vow. She said, You may be thirsty for blood, but I swear I will feed you red. She promised to stain the ground with Persian blood, and her vengeance would never stop. Cyrus had kidnapped her son. He'd invaded her lands. Now he wasn't just facing the Massage-Tay Queen, but the mother of the battle. But everyone agreed when the news reached Tomyris. Something inside her shattered and turned to steel. Her pain erupted like a volcano, but her rage became legendary. She sent another message to Cyrus. This wasn't a warning. It was a vow, she said. You might be a bloodthirsty guy, but I swear I will feed you. Well, she promised to stain the Persian soil with blood, and her revenge would never end. Cyrus had kidnapped her son. He invaded her land. Now, he wasn't just the opponent of the Massage-Tayan Queen, but the mother of a fallen warrior, and the last face he saw. The next battle wouldn't be a little skirmish. It would be an execution. The sun rose over the plains like a sword sharp and blinding. Tomyris led her army, no longer just a queen, but a storm unleashed. Her warriors, forged by nomadic life, painted their faces with her warriors, toughened by nomadic life, had painted their faces with ash and fury. This wasn't about politics anymore. This was blood. Cyrus, no matter how hard he tried, totally underestimated this massage therapy. He thought they'd fight like the disorganized tribes he'd conquered before, chaotic, uncoordinated, easy to crush. But Tomyris had spent her whole life among warriors. She knew how to attack, not blindly, but with precision. She gathered her forces for a full-on assault against the invading Persians, and this time she wasn't holding back. The site of the final battle was lost to history, swallowed by the vastness of the footsteps. But one thing was clear: Tomyris launched a fierce counterattack. Her cavalry swept across the plain like a razor wave. They shot arrows from horseback, speared with lances, and fought like people who had absolutely nothing left to lose. The Persians, battle-hardened, disciplined, and experienced, did not expect such organized fury. Tomyris wasn't just leading her army. She fought alongside them. Her presence on the battlefield ignited the warrior fire in her. Every strike was fueled by revenge. Every accusation was a reply to the death of her son. Cyrus tried to hold the line, but it broke. The Persians were defeated. Many died on the spot. Others fled into the endless grasslands, only to be hunted down. And Cyrus the Great, conqueror of Babylon, Lydia, and pretty much the known world, collapsed into chaos. Whether he was killed in battle or captured and executed depends on which version you hear. But either way, he died on Tomyris's terms. What happened next was downright scandalous. According to Herodotus, Tomyris found Cyrus's body on the battlefield, ordered his head chopped off, and then, in a final symbolic act of revenge, dunked his head into a skin full of human blood. She said, "Drink your fill of the blood you so thirst for." Was this historical fact or poetic license? Maybe both. But it doesn't matter. The message endures. Tomyris could not be defeated when the dust settled and the grass soaked up the empire's blood. Tomyris had won. A warrior queen had done what no king or army before her ever could. She brought Cyrus the Great's reign to an end. News of the defeat shook the ancient world. The mighty Achaemenid Empire, thought unstoppable, was humiliated by a woman from the steppes. The Persians tried hard to downplay the loss, but the death of their nation's founder couldn't be ignored. Cyrus's body was eventually returned and buried with honor in the royal tomb at Pasargadae. Yet, the stain from his final defeat lingered like a wound on the empire's legacy. But for Tamias and Majedi, this victory wasn't just revenge. It was a statement. They defended their sovereignty not only with weapons, but with dignity. Tamias stood up to the most powerful ruler in the world, and she didn't just survive, she won. Then, she vanished from history. No records remain about her later years, her death, or any other accomplishments. It's like after her revenge was done, Tamias just rode off into the horizon and let the wind carry her legend far away. In the centuries that followed, historians, poets, and chroniclers tried to fill the gaps, turning her into both a symbol and a woman. To the Persians, her name was a bitter reminder. To the Greeks, she was a paradox, a savage who showed more nobility than many kings. And to the Central Asians, Tamias became folklore, a fierce, tough, ghostly queen riding through every step with a sword. To remember, her legacy inspired countless images across cultures. Medieval manuscripts showed her in all the gaps, turning her into both a symbol and a woman. To the Persians, her name was a bitter reminder. To the Greeks, she was a paradox, a barbarian with more noble traits than many kings. And to the people of Central, Tamias became a folk legend, a fierce, no-nonsense queen riding through every step, sword in hand. Her legacy sparked countless images across cultures. Medieval manuscripts show her rocking royal armor, Renaissance paintings. She's towering over Cyrus's corpse like a boss. Every era needed her, a vengeful mom, a wild queen, a lesson in arrogance, or a symbol of female power. But here's the kicker. The myth, it's busted. She changed history. Tamias didn't just inherit the throne. She forged it in fire and fury, and in some get trampled under horseback warriors, fueled by pure grudges. Most of what we know about Tamias doesn't come from local massage records. They left no tombstones or royal archives, just the writings of a Greek guy named Herodotus, often called the father of history, writing a century after she lived. He immortalized Tamias, painting her as a warrior queen with insane determination and terrifying revenge. But Herodotus wasn't just reporting facts. He was weaving a tale part chronicle, part morality play. To him and the Greeks, Tamias flipped imperial arrogance on its head. Cyrus the Great, conqueror of half the known world, didn't fall to a mighty army or rival king, but to a woman fighting not for glory, but for her kid. Her victory was almost legendary, and Herodotus treated it that way. He even detailed her brutal revenge, a wineskin full of blood, Cyrus's severed head, and her curse, drink to your fill. But is that the truth? Modern historians argue endlessly over this. Some say Herodotus exaggerated or outright made stuff up, using Tamias as a storytelling tool to bring down the Persian Empire, a big scary rival back in his day. Others believe that while the blood wine story might be symbolic, the core event, Cyrus dying at Tamias's hands, probably happened. There's also the bias problem. Herodotus, wise as he was, often filtered foreign cultures through a Greek lens. He portrayed this massage therapy as wild, free, but noble, a weird mirror of Greek ideals about honor and liberty. In that frame, Tamias wasn't just some barbarian. She was a moral counterweight to Persian ambition. Yet, even if details blur over time, Herodotus nailed one thing. He made sure Tamias wouldn't be forgotten. Thanks to him, she became more than a footnote in history. She stepped into legend, where facts get softer, but the impact sharpens. And in that twilight zone between myth and memory, Tamias's story found a strange kind of immortality. In a world ruled by kings and conquerors, Herodotus left us a queen who refused to kneel and watched her enemies bleed out on the sand. Sure, she might have offed one of the ancient world's top emperors, but Tamias never ruled an empire herself. She didn't build cities of stone or etch golden tablets. Her people, the Maj, were nomads, living not by walls, but by the rhythms of earth, sky, and horse. That means her legacy was never institutionalized. No marble busts, no royal coins with her face, no archives storing her decrees. Instead, her story traveled as campfire tales, songs, and whispered warrior legends. Massage was just one of many powerful tribes in Central Asia. Their cousins included the Sayans, the Saka, and the Dahai, all expert horseback archers, roaming between the Caspian Sea and ancient China's border. Empires feared these tribes for their mobility, unpredictability, and ferocity in battle. Tamias, a female leader among them, was rare but not unique. Steppe culture, unlike many sedentary civilizations, gave women a lot more freedom. Women rode horses, hunted, fought, and even led. Marble bust or royal coin with her face, there's no archive holding her decrees. Nope. Her story rides on, passed down like campfire tales, warrior songs, and whispered legends. Massage was one of many fierce tribes in Central Asia. Their cousins, the Sayans, the Saka, and the Dahai, all expert horse archers, roaming the land between the Caspian Sea and ancient China's border. Empires feared these tribes for their speed, unpredictability, and downright savage fighting style. Tamias, a female leader among them, was rare but not unique. Steppe culture, unlike many less mobile civilizations, gave women way more freedom. Women rode horses, hunted, fought, and even led. Among the Scythia, archaeologists have found graves of female warriors buried with weapons, armor, and horse gear proving those. Tales of fierce warrior queens weren't just bedtime stories. Tamias stood at the peak of that tradition. Her power wasn't about bloodlines or religion. It came from respect, grit, and straight-up capability. She was the glue uniting scattered clans, a political leader and military commander in one. But since the massage robe left no marks, Tomias turned into a kind of ghost queen. Her name only pops up in outsider tales and local legends whispered around campfires. For Persian historians, she was a warning. For the Greeks, a marvel. And for the locals, maybe a memory carried in their blood, and battle songs a ghost roaming the plains with them. Empires rise and fall, but the stories of that stride ride the wind forever. And Tomias, fierce, unyielding, and a little heartbroken, became its voice. Centuries rolled on. The empires surrounding the Massagetæ rose and fell. Cyrus's successors built Persepolis, fought Alexander the Great, and slowly faded away with time. But her legend stuck around not in royal palaces, but in the hearts of those who refused to bow down. Across Central Asia, she became more than a queen. She became a symbol of women's power, resistance, and the unbreakable spirit of that fierce stride. In many ways, Tomius was the ultimate boundary breaker. Not Roman, not Greek, not Persian. Her story belonged to no empire. That's what made her dangerous and inspiring. In the medieval Islamic world, chroniclers mentioned her name from time to time, reshaped in their language, but never quite forgotten. In some versions, she's praised for fairness and vengeance. In others, a ruthless queen, a reminder that power in a woman's hands can be both glorious and terrifying. By the Renaissance, European artists rediscovered her story through Herodotus's writings. They painted her in elaborate armor, standing proud over Cyrus's lifeless body. In one dramatic painting, she holds up his severed head like a bloody trophy. Very theatrical, very political. These artists were drawn to the idea of a woman not just surviving in a man's world, but outright winning. By the 19th and 20th centuries, Tomius became a nationalist icon in places like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. Poets and educators hailed her as a historical heroine, proof that Central Asian roots are fierce, proud, and unapologetically feminine. Her name shows up in textbooks, monuments, and even military ceremonies. A woman who once ruled from horseback, bow in hand, now rides again through memory and myth, rebellion and pride. In a world still wrestling with powerful women, Tomyris remains a challenge. She's not perfect, saintly, or sweet. She's decisive, ruthless when needed, merciful only to the pitiful. She's resistance in human form, and the empire's blood on her hands is the crown she wears without regret. History loves monument builders, lawmakers, kings who carve their names in stone. Tomyris, she did none of that. No empire left behind, no palace to dig up, no royal seal to decode. But her name lives on, not because she ruled forever, but because she refused to be erased. She's the contradiction to how history usually remembers women, not as footnotes or helpers, but as the power of fate itself. Tomyris didn't beg for recognition. She took it with blood and fire. She didn't ride behind a king. She raced one and won. Her story's told in classrooms from Central Asia to Europe, not just because she killed Cyrus the Great, but because she dared to challenge him. She wasn't defending an empire. She was defending freedom. A freedom riding fierce horses with hunting hawks sleeping under starry skies. Fire. She didn't ride behind a king. She raced one and won. Her story got told from Central Asia all the way to Europe, not just because she offed Cyrus the Great, but because she dared to challenge him. She wasn't defending an empire. She was defending freedom. Freedom riding wild horses, hunting hawks sleeping under starry skies. A freedom you can't exactly pin on a map today. Her statue stands in Kazakhstan's capitals. Her face graces coins and textbooks. For modern Central Asians, she's the mother of nations. A bridge to a proud nomadic past. Pre-Islamic, pre-Soviet, a reminder that their identity wasn't born from submission, but from war cries and thunderous gallops. Hooves. In a world still tangled in power, gender, and memory, Tomyris is a beacon, not just because she killed a great king, but because she taught us something even greater. That dignity isn't handed out, it's seized. Sometimes, leadership looks like a grieving mother who won't let her son's killer walk away. We often wonder why some names stick around while others vanish. Tomyris survived because she's unforgettable at a time when women were expected to vanish into men's tents. She rose up sword in hand, fury in her heart and etched her story into history. Empires fall, statues crumble, but legends keep riding on. And somewhere in the whispering wind of footsteps, a queen still charges forward, unshaken, undefeated, and absolutely unforgettable in ancient Egypt. Beekeeping wasn't a hobby, it was a state sponsored science blessed by the gods. Long before modern apiaries, Egyptians developed a mobile, organized system to manage bees and harvest honey. By 2400 BC, beekeeping was detailed in tomb paintings in the sun-drenched cemeteries of Saqqara. It wasn't just about grabbing honey. It was a sacred ritual tied to agriculture, medicine, religion, and even the afterlife. Egyptians used horizontal clay to tube hives, often lined up and tilted at an angle. These weren't your modern wooden boxes. They looked more like clay drain pipes, carefully designed to be moved seasonally when the Nile's floodwaters receded and flowers bloomed along the banks. Beehives were hauled up and down the river, chasing the nectar flow. This was some next-level ancient GPS for bees. Beekeepers used clay or stone tubes to puff smoke into the hives, calming the bees before harvesting the honey. No fancy protective gear here, just careful timing, experience, and a whole lot of guts. They gently took the hives and collected honey not only for food, but also for medicine, embalming, and sacred ceremonies. Honey was considered a gift from the gods, a holy substance connected to Ra, the sun god. According to Egyptian myth, bees were born from Ra's tears when they fell to earth, not just a cute story. It shaped how Egyptians saw bees as messengers, linking the mortal world and the divine. Honey was used in temple offerings, religious rites, and even as currency in trade. It also played a big role in medicine. Ancient papyri record honey as the main ingredient in over 500 remedies, mixed with herbs, wine, or milk to treat wounds, infections, and digestive troubles. People knew about its antibacterial powers long before science caught up. Beeswax was harvested too and used in cosmetics, embalming, and even writing tablets. Its value went beyond the hive, becoming part of daily life for scribes, priests, and healers in Egypt. The hive wasn't just a sweet supply, it symbolized balance, healing, and cosmic order, carefully tended under the watchful eyes of both humans and gods. While Egypt brought structure and sacredness to beekeeping, ancient Mesopotamia gave it something just as vital: laws. The cradle of civilization wasn't just great at irrigation, writing, and city building. They also understood honey's value and the importance of protecting its production. Though beekeeping in Mesopotamia didn't get as much spotlight as Egyptian tombs, traces still appear on steles and patchy legal codes, showing it was a sophisticated, quiet business. References to bees and honey pop up as early as the Sumerian period in Akkadian and Babylonian texts. There's mention of nins, meaning bee gardens or bee farms. These spots were usually stuck next to temples or royal estates, making it clear that honey production was a resource tightly held by the upper crust. Honey and beeswax weren't just sweet treats. They were staples in religion, medicine, food, and trade. Losing a hive could mean serious economic heartbreak. The clearest proof, the Code of Hammurabi from about 1754 BC. Most of it deals with theft, injuries, and farming. But a few lines dive right into bee-related disputes. If your bees flew into your neighbor's crops and caused damage, you were on the hook. If someone stole honey, they had to pay up sometimes with silver or replacement jars. In a world where almost everything was measured in grain, the fact honey got legal protection is pretty impressive. The Mesopotamians knew bees were more than just bugs. Some texts call them divine messengers, even linking them to Ninut, the god of agriculture and war. Beeswax, especially, was prized for sealing documents and crafting ceremonial statues. It was both practical and mystical, part of bureaucracy and magic alike. We don't have exact designs of Mesopotamian hives, but scholars think they used mud brick or woven baskets, kind of like early Levantine beehives. These hives would be kept in shady gardens or on rooftops to escape the brutal summer heat. Beekeeping in Mesopotamia was less about worship and more about structure, resource management, fairness, and keeping the economy balanced where even cruelty could end up in court. Beekeeping in Mesopotamia wasn't just about worshiping bees. Nope. It was more about structure, resource management, fairness, and keeping the economy balanced in a society where even a nasty move could land you in court. Here, the beehive wasn't just a biological marvel, it was a mini world of order, law, and the very gears of civilization. Way back on the rugged Anatolian plateau, long before the Greeks took center stage, the Hittites quietly mastered beekeeping, and they didn't treat it as some backyard hobby. For the Hittites, bees were, unlike Egypt and Mesopotamia, where beekeeping mixed science and economy. The Hittites made it a full-on ritual affair. Their religious texts from the 14th and 13th centuries BC talk about bees not just as honeymakers, but as active players in purification rites. One famous Hittite ceremony describes summoning a bee to chase away evil, dirtiness, and the god's wrath. Then, instead of killing it, they'd set it free, a rare ancient show of mercy, showing serious respect for the little critter. The Hittites loved honey, not just because it tasted good, but for its sacred uses. It was poured in libations, offered in sacrifices, and used in anointing rituals, often mixed with wine, milk, or grain. Honey wasn't just eaten, it was poured, burned, and blessed. It was the bridge between human intentions and divine acceptance. Practically, evidence shows the Hittites used clay or woven hives, kept safe near temples or royal lands. Archaeological records are sparse, but they resemble Levant and Syrian traditions, movable tube-shaped hives made from straw and mud, stacked and managed like Egyptian hives. Hittite beekeepers probably operated under temple control. Their work was deeply tied to seasonal festivals and state rituals. Honey wasn't just a commodity, it was a diplomatic tool, a healing agent, and a spiritual cleanser. The humble bee carried symbolism way beyond its size. The Hittites also made a key contribution to global beekeeping knowledge. They understood bee migration. Surviving texts describe seasonal hive behavior, linking bloom cycles to honey, flow a sharp observation of their environment, more about migration patterns. Some surviving texts even describe the seasonal behavior of bee colonies. Linking blooming cycles to honey flow a pretty sharp insight into how closely they watched their environment in Anatolia. The buzzing of a beehive wasn't just background noise, it was a sacred frequency vibrating through the bones of gods and kings. Ancient Greeks didn't just study bees, they admired and feared them, even modeled their society on their mysterious order. For the Greeks, The hive was more than a honey container, it was a vivid metaphor, a blueprint for the perfect city state, a symbol of divine order, and a never ending curiosity magnet for science nerds. Greek beekeepers mixed hands on know how with deep philosophical thinking to develop their craft, unlike earlier civilizations that used fixed clay hives. The Greeks created portable clay hives with removable lids and sections. This made hive access easier without wrecking the bee's home, a first step towards sustainable honey farming. They also mastered smoke control, using ceramic blowpipes and clay smokers. They puffed smoke into hives to calm the bees before honey raids. This innovation not only cut down on bee stings, but also kept the hive intact for multiple harvests in a season. Aristotle, one of the biggest names in Greek history, obsessively studied bees in Historia Animalium. He described bee behavior and noticed they had distinct roles. Some gathered nectar, others guarded the hive, and one he called the queen seemed to be the boss. He got the gender wrong. But Aristotle's observations laid the groundwork for centuries of bee research. Honey was a big deal in Greek culture. It sweetened wine, preserved fruit, and flavored cakes. It was also a base for ointments, especially wound care, and considered a sacred gift. Greeks believed ambrosia, the god's food, was a mix of honey and wine. Bees themselves had mythical importance, linked to Artemis, goddess of the wild animals, and Demeter, goddess of harvest. Artemis's priestesses were even called Melissa, which means bee in Greek. The idea of bees as a sacred feminine force packed some serious symbolism for Greeks. The hive was both a scientific marvel and a spiritual symbol, a reminder that even the tiniest creatures move with purpose, discipline, and grace. Studying bees was like studying the laws of nature and maybe the gods themselves. While the Greeks studied bees with wide-eyed wonder, the Romans managed them with ambition. Beekeeping in the Roman Empire wasn't just a craft, it was an empire-wide industry, from vineyards in Gaul to hills in Hispania. Rome turned humble hives into a pan-imperial business. The Romans inherited much of their farming know-how from the Greeks and Etruscans, but turned it into a legit agricultural science. Writers like Varro and Columella left detailed manuals on building hives, harvesting honey, and moving bee colonies. Their theories were surprisingly modern, covering bee behavior, seasonal cycles, and pest control. Roman hives came in all shapes: hollow logs, bark barrels, clay tubes, even baskets sealed with mud or dung. Flexibility was key. Colder regions needed insulation, warmer provinces needed ventilation. These tweaks let Roman beekeepers work all over the empire. To calm bees, Romans used clay pots filled with smoldering herbs like thyme or spicy savory. The smoke soothed the hive and maybe even added a subtle flavor to the honey. Harvesting was done with iron knives, and wax was separated by melting and filtering. Wax then went into candles, writing tablets, cosmetics, and even waterproofing for ships. Honey wasn't just food, it was everywhere. People mixed it into wine to make balsam, baked it in treats, used it to preserve meat and fish, and even as early energy for athletes. And big deal, those innovations let Roman beekeepers spread their craft across the empire. To calm the bees, Romans used clay pots filled with smoldering herbs like thyme or spicy savory. The smoke chilled out the hive and maybe even gave the honey a subtle flavor boost. Harvesting was done with iron knives, and wax was separated by melting and filtering. That wax got used in candles, writing tablets, cosmetics, and even waterproofing for ships. Honey wasn't just food, it was everywhere. People mixed it into wine to make mulsum, baked with it, used it to preserve meat and fish, and it was even the original energy drink for athletes and soldiers. Roman doctors, masters of hypocrisy, prescribed honey for sore throats, wounds, fevers, and digestive problems. Its antibacterial powers were well known and widely used, but maybe the most Roman thing about their beekeeping was the organization. Large villas often had dedicated apiaries run by slaves under the watchful eye of the estate manager. Production was carefully recorded, and surplus honey was sold in. Bees weren't just bugs, they were legit economic citizens in Rome. For Romans, a well-run beehive was like a well-run family, neat, obedient, and constantly multiplying, while ancient civilizations kept bees for honey and wax. Many saw the hive as a gateway to the divine. Across Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, and beyond, bees weren't just insects, they were spiritual messengers, flying between worlds, delivering messages from gods and dropping off sacred gifts like honey bridging nature and the supernatural. In Egypt, bees were directly linked to divine creation. Remember how the sun god Ra supposedly cried tears that turned into bees when they hit the ground? Yeah, that story. Honey was used as offerings in temples to please the gods and accompanied the dead into the afterlife. Bees also became royal symbols. Pharaohs in Lower Egypt carried titles involving reeds and bees, tying their power to the cosmic harmony of the hive. In Greece, bees symbolized strong feminine energy, priestesses of Demeter and Artemis. The goddesses of fertility and wilderness were called Melissae, which means bees. These women were seen as bridges between the divine and the mortal world. The temple at Delos, one of the ancient world's major religious centers, was believed by some to have been initially run by bee nuns. Even Pythia, the famous oracle of Delphi, was sometimes nicknamed the Delphic bee. The hive itself was often viewed as a tiny perfect world of order, discipline, selflessness, and efficiency. Philosophers and mystics compared bee society to an ideal human society: cooperative, hardworking, and respectful. Stoics admired bees for their strong sense of duty. Early Christians later saw bees as symbols of purity and resurrection, noting their creative but non-lustful nature. In Mesopotamian magic traditions, bees were used in purification rituals. In some Hittite ceremonies, a live bee was released after absorbing the community's impurities, carrying sins away on its tiny wings. Honey and wax were burned in sacred fires, used to craft amulets, and dipped into magical texts for blessings and healing. The bee wasn't just a metaphor, it was a living bridge, a creature hiding in nature's shadows, making golden food without slaughter, stinging only to defend itself. To ancient folks, bees were more than magical animals, they were mystical. For the ancient world, honey wasn't just tasty, it was divine medicine. Long before bacteria were discovered, people instinctively knew honey could clean wounds, soothe coughs, and protect the body. Not magic, though it sure felt like it sometimes. It was chemistry centuries ahead of official explanations. In Egypt, honey was the cornerstone of ancient medicine. Medical papyri like the Abers, papyrus from around 1550 BC, list honey in over 500 remedies. It was mixed with milk, figs, garlic, and herbs to treat everything from eye infections to digestive issues. Combined with animal fat or pine resin, it became ointments for burns and cuts. Doctors knew wounds treated with honey healed faster and resisted infection, likely thanks to honey's natural acidity and hydrogen peroxide content. The Greeks followed suit. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, prescribed honey for respiratory problems, ulcers, and fatigue. He made oxymel, a mix of honey and vinegar, as a tonic to cleanse the body and reduce fever. Greek athletes drank honey water to boost endurance during Olympic training, believing it helped them recover faster than just booze or plain water. In India, the Ayurvedic system held honey, or mardu, in high regard. It was classified by flavor, origin, and medicinal strength. Ayurvedic texts warned against using overly hot honey, but praised it as a cure for indigestion, colds, wounds, and even poisoning. It also played a role in religious rituals and offerings, offered to the gods and used in sacred fasting rituals to cleanse both spirit and body. The Romans, of course, believed in honey's healing powers too. Pliny the Elder scribbled down dozens of honey remedies in his book, Natural History. Honey was the base for ointments, mouthwashes, and laxatives, and even treated battle wounds afterward. Honey mixed with poppy juice served as a sedative. Roman surgeons always kept some on hand to dress wounds and reduce inflammation. Beeswax was also used medicinally as a key ingredient in plasters, ointments, and even dental fillings. Its stickiness and resistance to decay made it perfect for sealing and preserving stuff. In short, ancient honey wasn't just sweet. It saved lives, healed the sick, protected the dead, and stood for purity. It was the pharmacy of the gods, delivered on the wings of bees. Ancient beekeepers weren't just farmers. They were innovators, engineers, and keen nature watchers across civilizations. They developed specialized tools and methods to manage hives efficiently, harvest honey sustainably, and even protect themselves from stings. One of the biggest breakthroughs was hive design. The Egyptians popularized horizontal cylindrical clay hives, basically big, stacked ceramic tubes. These hives were sturdy, portable, and mimicked natural bee cavities. Similarly, the Greeks and Romans used clay hives and woven baskets with removable lids, letting bees be accessed without wrecking the whole colony. Being able to inspect and harvest without killing the bees was revolutionary, paving the way for modern sustainable beekeeping. To safely get honey, ancient keepers used smoke to calm the bees. The Greeks invented clay smokers and bellows designed to funnel smoke into the hive entrance. The guard bees' alarm pheromones get dulled by smoke, making them less grumpy. Romans refined this by burning fragrant herbs like thyme or savory, which calmed the bees and could add a subtle flavor to the honey. Harvesting tools varied widely. People carefully cut honeycombs with wooden or bronze knives. Sometimes they'd crush hives to extract liquid honey, then melt and filter the wax for later use. Beekeepers usually wore minimal protective gear, relying on experience and technique to dodge stings. Suits and gloves showed up thousands of years later. Ancient texts reveal beekeepers watched bees obsessively, understanding their cycles, seasonal patterns, and how moving hives optimized nectar gathering. Some cultures practiced hive migration, moving colonies to follow blooming flowers, basically ancient bee road trips. Much like modern migratory beekeeping, storing honey was another crucial aspect. Egyptians used sealed ceramic jars to keep honey safe from moisture and spoilage. Honey's mind-blowing shelf life was well known, sometimes lasting centuries in tombs. Even the human-bee relationship was carefully managed. Rituals soothed bee spirits or gods to ensure cooperation and avoid bad luck. This spiritual care was just as important as physical tools for maintaining productive hives. Overall, ancient beekeeping was a mashup of craft, natural science, and reverence. The tools and techniques they developed laid the foundation for modern beekeeping. Ancient practices built the ongoing bond between humans and bees. Beekeeping wasn't just farming, it was an art and science influencing medicine, religion, economics, and ecology across civilizations, shaping how we understand nature. And sealed ceramic jars to keep honey fresh, protecting it from moisture and spoilage. Honey's shelf life was insanely long, sometimes lasting centuries. When stored in tombs, even the human-bee relationship was carefully managed. Rituals were performed to soothe the spirits of bees or gods, ensuring cooperation and avoiding bad luck. This spiritual care was just as crucial as physical tools for maintaining a productive hive. Overall, ancient beekeeping was a mix of craft, natural science, and reverence. The tools and techniques they developed laid the groundwork for modern beekeeping. Their practices set the foundation for the human-bee relationship that continues today. It wasn't just farming. Early beekeeping was an art and science that influenced medicine, religion, economy, and ecology across civilizations, shaping how we understand nature and sustainability. From the Nile Valley to the Anatolian hills, from Greek temples to Roman farms, ancient beekeepers honed methods to protect and maintain their colonies. Their innovations in hive design, use of smoke, and seasonal management helped sustain honey harvesting, a key activity for both survival and commerce. Their respect for the bee's life cycle nurtured a model of harmony between humans and nature. Their respect for the bee's life cycle nurtured a model of harmony between humans and nature. Their knowledge of honey as medicine fed into the earliest pharmacopoeias of Egypt, India, and Rome, shaping healing practices that still buzz around traditional medicine worldwide. Honey's antibacterial and preservative powers became the backbone of wound care. Meanwhile, beeswax kick-started early tech in cosmetics, art, and construction. While the symbolic and spiritual meaning of bees and honey stuck around in ancient cultures, religious rituals honoring bees and honey kept on trucking across various traditions, showing humanity's endless fascination with the beehive as a metaphor for order, teamwork, and divine blessings. The idea of bees as messengers between worlds or symbols of rebirth seeped into art, literature, and folklore over centuries. Plus, ancient migratory beekeeping, moving hives with the blooming seasons, is still a thing in modern commercial farming, crucial for crop pollination and global food production. The old-school beekeepers' innovations laid the groundwork for today's understanding of bees as essential pollinators and the environmental challenges they face. Despite tech advances, the core relationship hasn't changed. Humans rely on bees for food, medicine, and keeping ecosystems healthy, and bees have shaped human culture, economy, and spirituality since civilization's dawn. The legacy of ancient beekeeping is a testament to human ingenuity, respect for nature, and the enduring power of cooperation in the hive and between species, it reminds us that even the tiniest creatures can inspire science, faith, and survival.